The oncologist used the word progressive and then a number, and I remember very little of what she said after that number, because my mind had stopped in the room somewhere around the words 2 years. My name is Mason Parker. I am 72 years old, and roughly 14 months ago, I was given a diagnosis that most people spend their whole lives hoping they never hear a version of. I am not going to spend this video walking you through the medical details, partly because they are mine to hold privately, and partly because I do not think the specifics of my diagnosis are actually the important part of this story. What matters is the decision I made in the 6 weeks that followed, and what I have learned since making it, because I think there is something in this for you, whether you are facing anything like what I am facing or not. I want to be honest about the first several weeks, because I think stories like this one often skip the ugly part in favor of getting to the inspiring part too quickly, and I do not want to do that to you. I did not handle the news well. I told almost no one for nearly a month. I went through a period of what I can only describe as a strange, quiet fury, not at any particular person or even at the universe in any coherent way, just a low hum of anger that sat underneath everything I did. I stopped attending the small men's breakfast group I had gone to nearly every Tuesday for 6 years because I could not tolerate the thought of the sympathy that would arrive the moment I said the word cancer out loud in that room. I researched treatment options extensively, the way I suspect most people in my position do, running the calculations on quality of life against extended time, a kind of arithmetic I never expected to be doing at this stage of my life. My daughter Emily was the first person I told, roughly 5 weeks after the diagnosis, and I told her badly, over the phone, in a way that I still regret, because she deserved to hear something that significant in person, and I was not yet capable of saying it to her face without falling apart in a way I was not ready for her to see. She flew in from Seattle 2 days later and sat with me at my kitchen table for the better part of a weekend, mostly in silence, which turned out to be exactly what I needed and precisely what I would not have known to ask for. It was during that weekend, somewhere in the middle of a long, quiet Saturday afternoon, that the idea first surfaced, almost accidentally. Emily had been to the Philippines several years earlier for a friend's wedding and had mentioned it in passing at some point, the way people mention trips they enjoyed. I do not fully know why that memory surfaced when it did, sitting at my kitchen table with a prognosis I was still not able to say out loud without my voice doing something strange. But it did, and once it surfaced, I could not put it back down. I had spent 46 years working as a structural engineer, mostly on infrastructure projects across the American Midwest, and I had, if I am honest with myself, spent the overwhelming majority of that career and the retirement that followed it inside a fairly narrow radius of familiar places. The prognosis had done something specific to my sense of time. It had converted an abstract, distant someday into a number I could count on 2 hands. And once time became countable in that particular way, the question I kept returning to was disarmingly simple. What was I actually doing with the 2 years? And was it what I wanted to be doing? Before I tell you what I decided, subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. This channel is not usually about topics quite this personal, but every week we do cover the financial and practical decisions that matter most to American seniors. And next week, I am covering the specific end-of-life financial planning steps that I wish I had completed years before any of this happened. The documents, the conversations, the arrangements that protect the people you love from added stress during an already difficult time. Subscribe now because I think that video matters regardless of your current health. I made the decision roughly 8 weeks after the diagnosis, and I want to be precise about what that decision actually was, because I think it gets misunderstood in stories like this one. I was not running from treatment. I remain under the care of an excellent oncology team, and I returned to the United States for scans and consultations on a schedule we worked out together before I left. I was not chasing some fantasy of a miracle cure or a change of scenery that would alter my diagnosis, because I do not believe geography changes biology, and I was clear-eyed with myself about that from the beginning. What I decided was considerably simpler than either of those things. I decided that if my remaining time was going to be measured in a specific, finite number, I did not want to spend the bulk of it inside the same house, following largely the same routines that had constituted my life for the previous 2 decades. I wanted the days to feel different from one another. I wanted, for lack of a more precise way to say it, to actually notice the days, rather than let them pass the way days had been passing for years before the diagnosis arrived and abruptly made their number countable. I chose the Philippines partly because of Emily's brief, positive mention of it, and partly because the research I did in the following weeks suggested it offered something I specifically needed, which was a combination of genuine warmth from the people, a slower daily pace than anything I had experienced in my working life, and a cost of living low enough that I would not need to spend any of my remaining time worrying about money, which had been a low background stress throughout most of my adult life, even during healthy years. I settled in a coastal town in the Visayas region, in a small rented house with a porch that faces the water, close enough that I can hear it most nights with the windows open. I will tell you plainly that the early weeks here involved a particular kind of grief I had not fully anticipated, which was grieving the version of my life I had expected to have, running parallel to whatever version I am actually living now. There were mornings I woke up and, for a few seconds before full consciousness arrived, forgot entirely, and then remembered, and had to sit with that remembering all over again as though it were new information. That does not fully go away, even now, 14 months in. I do not think it is supposed to. What has surprised me most is not the scenery, though it is genuinely beautiful, and not even the cost of living, though it has removed a category of worry I did not fully realize I was carrying until it was gone. What has surprised me is how much ordinary human connection has come to matter in a way it simply had not for most of my working life. There is a family 2 houses down, headed by a woman named Corazon, who runs a small sari-sari store, essentially a tiny convenience shop built into the front of her home, and within the first month she had adopted me into something resembling her extended family without either of us ever formally discussing it. Her grandchildren call me Lolo Mason, a term of affection roughly equivalent to grandfather, and on Sunday afternoons I am now, apparently, an expected presence at a meal that 6 or 7 members of her family attend without fail. I did not ask for this. It simply happened, the way I have come to understand that a great many good things happen here, through a kind of quiet, persistent inclusion that never asks permission and rarely announces itself as anything significant. I want to address something directly, because I suspect some of you watching are wondering it. I have not told Corazon's family the specifics of my diagnosis, and I do not currently plan to. This was a deliberate choice, not an avoidance. I have spent enough of my adult life being defined, in various rooms, by various circumstances, my job title, my divorce many years ago, more recently my diagnosis, and I found, once I arrived here, that I specifically did not want to be defined by this particular circumstance in this particular place. Here, I am simply Lolo Mason, the retired American who cannot properly pronounce half the dishes he is served, and who insists on paying for things he is rarely allowed to pay for. That specific anonymity, if that is even the right word for it, has been more restorative than I expected anything to be at this stage. Emily has visited twice since I arrived, and on her second visit, sitting on that porch facing the water, she told me something I have thought about many times since. She said that for the first time since the diagnosis, I sounded like myself again on our phone calls, rather than sounding like a man carefully managing a conversation around an unspoken subject. I told her I thought that was probably true, and that I could not fully explain why, except that I suspected it had something to do with the difference between counting days and actually living inside them, which are not, I have come to understand, the same activity at all, even though I spent most of my life assuming they were. I do not know exactly how much time remains for me, And I am not going to pretend this video ends with some tidy resolution to that uncertainty, because there is no resolution to it, only different ways of carrying it. What I can tell you, 14 months into a 2-year prognosis, is that I do not regret the decision to come here, not for a single day, even the difficult ones, of which there have been plenty. If you are facing something similar right now, a diagnosis that has made your remaining time suddenly countable in a way it was not before, I am not telling you that moving to another country is the answer, because it may not be yours. And it took me 8 full weeks of a fairly ugly internal process to arrive at it as mine. But I will tell you the question that got me here, because I think it is worth asking regardless of your circumstances, healthy or otherwise. If your remaining time were suddenly a specific, countable number, would you be spending it the way you are currently spending it? For most of my life, without a diagnosis forcing the question, I would not have been able to answer that honestly. I can now, and the answer, most days, sitting on this porch with the water audible through the open window, is yes. Subscribe to Mason Parker USA and turn on the notification bell. I will see you in the next one.